All of this trade talk lately surrounding Mitch Marner kind of got me thinking, who are some other star NHL players that could potentially be on the move at some point during the offseason? So I made up a list of players that I wanted to share with you guys today. I made a video just like this at almost this exact same time last year, so I figured why not do it again? Let's make this a yearly thing. As always, I want to know what you guys are thinking, so if there's any star NHL players that I don't talk about in this video that you feel like could be traded at some point during the offseason, be sure to let me know who those players are and why down below in the comments. If you end up enjoying this video, please remember to leave it a like. It definitely helps out the videos a ton. Subscribe to the channel if you're new and you want NHL content just like this all year round. And with that all being said, let's go ahead and start the video off with the first player on my list, Nikolai Ehlers of the Winnipeg Jets. Ehlers is heading into the final year of his contract next season, has a very team-friendly cap hit of just $6 million. He's coming off of a very strong regular season with the Jets where he scored 25 goals and put up 61 points, played in all 82 games, which is key for Nikolai Ehlers. It was really nice to see him stay healthy. It's the first time he's played in all 82 games since the 2017-18 season. In my opinion, Nikolai Ehlers is one of the best skaters in the NHL. He's a very efficient scorer and play driver at even strength. He doesn't see a lot of time on the Jets' top power play unit with the likes of Scheifele and Connor, and he actually only averaged a little under 16 minutes of ice time per game this season with Winnipeg, so I feel like that makes his totals that much more impressive. He's a player where I feel like if he was given a bigger opportunity to play top line minutes, play on a team's top power play unit, he could really pop off. And that's kind of a reason why I have him on my list, because he's heading into the final year of his contract, and I think he's a player who would benefit from a change of scenery. Now, Rick Bowness did retire after the Winnipeg Jets were eliminated in the first round by the Colorado Avalanche, so maybe whoever ends up being the Winnipeg Jets' next head coach could use Nikolai Ehlers in a bigger role. I definitely don't think it's a for sure thing that Ehlers will be traded at some point this summer by any means, but I feel like if you're the Winnipeg Jets front office and you're not getting any indication from Nikolai Ehlers that he plans on signing long-term, I think it makes the most sense to explore trade options, because Nikolai Ehlers, with that $6 million cap hit on an expiring contract, I think is a very valuable asset. That being said, these are a lot of the same things we said about Mark Scheifele and Connor Hellebuck last offseason, and then all of a sudden they both signed matching 8-year contracts. So who knows, but I am really intrigued to see what happens with Ehlers. Moving along now to the next player on my list, the first of 3 goaltenders we're going to talk about today, Jacob Markstrom of the Calgary Flames. Markstrom is still signed for 2 more seasons with the Calgary Flames at a cap hit of $6 million per season, and he's coming off of a big bounce back year with Calgary. Finished the season with a record of 23 wins, 23 losses, and 2 overtime losses, a .905 save percentage, and according to Evolving Hockey's model, he finished 3rd in the entire NHL in goals saved above expected, only behind Binnington and Hellebuck. His performance this season with the Calgary Flames definitely bolstered his trade value quite a bit. You have to imagine he's looked at as a much more valuable asset right now than he was last offseason, for an example, when he was coming off of a down season and still had 3 years left on his deal. Leading up to this year's trade deadline, there was a lot of talk about Jacob Markstrom potentially being on the move. He was tied to the New Jersey Devils at one point. I personally thought that's where he was going to go, but as we know now, Markstrom didn't even end up getting traded, and he finished out the season as a member of the Calgary Flames, but definitely fueled trade speculation for this offseason by some of the things he said in the end of season media availability. Markstrom was asked where he sees himself playing next season, and he was pretty blunt with his response. He just said, "I don't know." Craig Conroy, who also spoke to the media at the end of the season, was asked about Markstrom, and he just said, "Time will tell." So I feel like the writing's kind of on the wall here. I'm pretty confident that Markstrom is going to be on a different team come October. Who that team could be, I'm not so sure. I still think the Devils make some sense, even though they already went out and acquired Jake Allen. I think the Kings make sense, the Maple Leafs, and speaking of the Maple Leafs, there is a connection there. Brad Treliving, who is now the general manager of Toronto, was the GM of Calgary when Markstrom signed that 6-year, $36 million deal. So I think that fit makes a bit of sense for sure. Moving on now to the next player on my list. Not going to spend too much time on this one because we've talked about this player at length on the channel recently. Mitch Marner of the Toronto Maple Leafs. I'm of the belief that the Maple Leafs need a big shakeup, and sure, they fired Sheldon Keefe, and that is a change, but I think they need a big change in terms of the roster itself, shaking up the core, and I've said it before, I'll say it again, you're obviously not trading Austin Matthews, you're not trading William Nylander because you already signed him to a massive extension. Now, John Tavares' name has been thrown around a little bit, but I really just don't think that makes a whole lot of sense because I can't imagine the Leafs would get that great of a return for John Tavares. He makes $11 million bucks. He's past his prime. In my opinion, Mitch Marner definitely makes the most sense as a trade candidate when it comes to the core four. Now, it is a bit of a sticky situation because Marner has a full no move clause. If he doesn't want to be traded, well, then there's really nothing the Maple Leafs could do. And in Mitch Marner's end of season media availability, it kind of sounded like he wanted to remain a Maple Leaf. I think a lot of this is going to come down to how his contract negotiations go. He's eligible for an extension with the Leafs on July 1st. Now, if you guys remember, Mitch Marner's first contract negotiations with the Maple Leafs were pretty rocky, so if this next negotiation goes anything like the first one, then I think there's a good chance we could see Marner dealt before the start of next season. Continuing on now to the next player on my list, we have another goaltender, Linus Ullmark of the Boston Bruins. Ullmark is heading into the final year of his contract next season. He has a cap of $5 million. The Vezina Trophy winner from 2023 is coming off of another very strong regular season with the Boston Bruins. Him and Swayman pretty much split the starts right down the middle. In 40 games, Ullmark finished with a record of 22, 10, and 7, a 2.55 goals against, and a .915 save percentage. It's no secret that running with two elite goaltenders like the Bruins have with Swayman and Ullmark has worked really well for them over these last couple of seasons. They have a great relationship, they love playing together, they love sharing the net, but with Ullmark heading into the final year of his contract and Swayman being an RFA this offseason, you just have to wonder how sustainable is this tandem. Swayman's due for a big raise over the $3.475 million that he made this season, probably going to come in at north of $6 million if I had to guess. And again, the tandem of these two has proven to work beautifully, but if you're the Boston Bruins, does it make sense to tie that much money up in a tandem when Jeremy Swayman could likely do just fine as the solidified starter that, plays 55, 60 games in a season? I think we can all agree that Jeremy Swayman has done enough over these last couple of seasons to solidify himself as the goaltender of the present and future for the Boston Bruins. He's much younger than Linus Ullmark, and it was reported that the Boston Bruins were shopping Linus Ullmark leading up to this year's trade deadline, and I believe it was even reported that Ullmark actually vetoed a trade that would have sent him to the LA Kings. So it's not like the Boston Bruins haven't thought about trading Ullmark before. He has a modified no-trade clause currently. I believe it switches from a 16-team no-trade list to a 15-team no-trade list this offseason. So while Ullmark does have some trade protection, it's not like it's a full no-move clause where if Ullmark doesn't want to get traded, then there's nothing Boston can do. Considering how fantastic these two have been as a tandem, and it really seems like Ullmark wants to remain a Boston Bruin, I don't think it's out of the realm of possibilities that we see Ullmark just play out the final year of his contract with the Bruins and then maybe leave as an unrestricted free agent. But if you're Boston, I think it makes a lot more sense to try and trade Linus Ullmark to improve other areas of the team, because that's a guy who would likely fetch the Bruins a pretty solid return. Moving along now to the next player on my list, we have Pavel Buchnevich of the St. Louis Blues. He's another guy on this list who will be heading into the final year of his contract next season. Buchnevich carries a very team-friendly cap hit of just $5.8 million. He's another player who, similar to what I said about Jacob Markstrom earlier in the video, there was a lot of talk about Buchnevich leading up to this year's trade deadline. As we know now, he didn't end up getting traded, and St. Louis Blues general manager Doug Armstrong actually came out after the trade deadline and said he never had any intention of moving him and he wants to sign Buchnevich to an extension. I feel like the St. Louis Blues are in a bit of a weird spot right now. They're kind of just in the murky middle where they aren't really in a full-on rebuild. It's more of a retool where they're still competitive, but at the same time, they're not really a team I think anyone views as a legit contender in a very stacked Western Conference. So while yes, Doug Armstrong has made it known he wants to extend Pavel Buchnevich, I feel like he has to at least consider it if he's blown away by an offer, which I could see happening because Pavel Buchnevich right now would be an incredibly valuable trade chip. Again, a very team-friendly cap hit of just $5.8 million. Buchnevich is a legit top-line forward who's good at pretty much everything. He's capable of getting you 30 goals in a season, underrated playmaking ability, solid play driver, and a really underrated two-way forward as well. I think any trade package for Pavel Buchnevich would almost have to start with a first-round draft pick, a top prospect, and maybe a young roster player. And for a team that is in the position the St. Louis Blues are in right now, if you get that kind of offer for a player on an expiring deal, I think it would be a massive mistake not to entertain the idea of moving him. Moving along now to the next player on my list, I feel like this is a little bit more of a bold one. Trevor Zegras of the Anaheim Ducks, a former 9th overall selection from the 2019 draft. Zegras is still under contract with the Anaheim Ducks for 2 more seasons at a cap hit of $5.75 million, and upon expiry, he will still be a restricted free agent. Trevor Zegras is coming off of a pretty rough season in Anaheim, riddled with injuries, only appeared in 31 games, and in those 31 games, he had just 15 points, didn't really look like himself. All the trade rumors surrounding Trevor Zegras really started when the Anaheim Ducks went out and kind of shocked everybody, making that trade Jamie Drysdale for Cutter Gauthier, a trade that really bolstered the Anaheim Ducks center depth in terms of the young talent on the roster. You have Cutter Gauthier, Mason McTavish, Leo Carlson, who are all players that are all, again, centers, and all players that, in my opinion, have a higher ceiling than Trevor Zegras. And all the trade rumors surrounding Zegras throughout the season were loud enough to get his attention. In late April, he was asked by Eric Stevens Stevens of The Athletic about all the trade rumors, and Zegras said, "You see it. It's hard not to see. Definitely sucks. I think you can always control what you can control." He also said to Eric Stevens in regards to Pat Verbeek, "Whether or not we talk, I know he's always got the best interest of the Ducks and what's best for his team. Kind of just let him do his thing and try to play the best hockey you can." It was reported that one of the teams with a lot of interest in Trevor Zegras is the Montreal Canadiens. I know there's quite a bit of people out there that think maybe something could be done at the draft between those two teams. Montreal has the 5th overall selection. The Canadiens have made it clear they're definitely in the market for young, already established NHLers who can help them now but also be a part of the future, guys like Kirby Dach, Alex Newhook, so maybe Trevor Zegras is another guy that they could target. I'm really intrigued to see what ends up happening with Zegras. I think he's kind of a controversial player in the sense that there's a lot of people out there that I feel like overrate him, and then there's also a lot of people that tend to underrate him and undervalue him as a player. One thing that I can confidently say about Trevor Zegras is he is definitely a very intriguing trade piece if the Ducks are actually serious about potentially moving him. And now finally finishing out the video with the last player on my list, we have another goaltender, UC Saros of the Nashville Predators. Saros is heading into the final year of his contract next season, has a very team-friendly cap hit of just $5 million, and you have to imagine upon expiry he will be in for a pretty significant raise. I will say of the 3 goaltenders that we will have talked about in this video, Saros, Markstrom, and Ullmark, I think Saros is the least likely to be dealt of the 3, just based off of where Nashville is at as an organization. They surprised a lot of people and made the playoffs this year. They did lose in the first round to the Canucks, but I think they had a much better season than a lot of people expect them to. Definitely me. And based on how their roster is constructed, I think Nashville is a team that definitely wants to remain competitive. They don't have any plans to go into a full-fledged rebuild, so I don't think it's out of the realm of possibilities that they try to lock up Saros and have him there for, the long haul along with the likes of Roman Josi and Philip Forsberg. But at the same time, if they don't get any indication from Saros that he wants to sign there long-term, then I think it only makes sense to explore trading him, especially when you have somebody like Yaroslav Askarov in your system. So we'll see what ends up happening with Saros. Again, I feel like this one's more of a longer shot than Markstrom and Ullmark, but I do definitely think there is a possibility, a big enough possibility as to where I felt the need to include him in this video. And you have to think, if Nashville does end up making Saros available for trade, any team out there that's in the market for a goaltender, Saros would probably shoot right to the top of their list. So that is going to wrap up today's video. Those are some NHL stars that I think we could see traded at some point during the offseason. Like I mentioned at the beginning of the video, I always want to know what you guys are thinking, so if there's any players that I didn't mention in this video that you would have on your list, let me know who those players are and why down below in the comments. If you guys enjoyed the video, please remember to leave it a like. It definitely helps the video get pushed out there more, and I do really appreciate it. And most importantly, if this was your first time checking out the channel and you want NHL content just like this all year round, hit that subscribe button, and I'll talk to you all again soon.